Thank you all for joining us for the How to Run a Great Meeting workshop. Joining us today is Dr. Kyle Kahlberg, Executive Director of Strategy and Strategic Initiatives. He's going to introduce you to the main functions of a meeting and will coach you through defining the objectives for your next meetings. I will now hand it over to Dr. Kahlberg to get us started.
Great, thank you. It is my pleasure to be here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. My name is Kyle Kahlberg. I'm Executive Director for Strategy and Strategic Initiatives in the President's Office here at UNLV. I've been in the President's Office for the last 9 years. During that time, I've had the opportunity to serve under 5 different administrations. So I've gotten to see quite a range of leadership and different way in which things are run at the university. And one of the things that I often get to do during my 8-hour workday is spend a majority of my time in meetings. But one of the real benefits of my job is that I get the opportunity to know so many people across campus, and I get great opportunities such as today where I get to actually speak with students who are the lifeblood of our university. So again, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to going through this content with you and getting your feedback. So as I said, I'm very familiar with conducting meetings. These range from one-on-one to small groups to large groups of 15 to 30 to up to very large groups of 200. And each of these has a different way in which they're run. And of course, you're probably familiar with the formalities of meetings, such as Robert's Rules of Order, which is a great way to keep meetings running smoothly and online. However, today is not about the formal process associated with Robert's Rules. It's more on just making sure that you can run a great meeting yourself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I just want to talk about the general types of meeting types and functions, objectives and guidelines, and how to plan and prepare for meetings. So with that, when you hear meetings, what comes to mind? What has your experience been? Some great titles of books about meetings. As you can see, there is some concern over meetings, such as Death by Meeting, Meetings Suck, and Bad Meetings. But there's also the optimistic, mind-blowing, effective, taking minutes off, leading great meetings, and the science of meetings. So of course, we want you to be in that second category and be able to have great meetings. So what do we mean when we say meeting? Well, there are all different types, and there's a piece of background that I'd like to share with you before we dive into our main content. There are basically 6 types of meetings that we will take a look at. Meeting SIFT identifies these as status update, information sharing, decision making, problem solving, innovation, and team building. So our status updates are meant to provide updates on progress, challenges, and next steps. Information sharing, which is presentations, debates, keynotes, and lectures. Decision making are those that require decisions to be made, and processes need to be considered in terms of how you will reach that decision. Problem solving are complex and varied. The scope and priorities need to be defined, opportunities and threats need to be identified, and solutions will be brainstormed and evaluated. Innovation meetings are those that often begin with brainstorming and then use processes to reduce diverse ideas to smaller focused lists. And team building meetings are those that strengthen relationships and cultures. Now, the point of that is just to give you a little bit of background in that meetings are very different. And we're not going to really focus on categorizing our meetings, but we need to be aware that they each serve a different purpose. The intention, format, and participation will determine which type of meeting best suits your needs. And you can learn more if you are interested on the website listed at the bottom of the screen. Most importantly, before you begin to prepare for a meeting, you need to ask yourself, do I really need to have a meeting? For our purposes today, knowing that you're thriving students at UNLV, I'm going to work under the assumption that I'm helping prepare you to run meetings that would be suitable for class projects, departments you may work with or volunteer with, or meetings at your workplace. And of course, our main assumption is, yes, we will need a meeting. So next, we will discuss 3 guidelines. These are 3 items that will help guide you as you plan, and I'm going to talk through each one of these specifically. First, set an agenda. When the meeting invitation is sent, it should include a statement of purpose. Everyone should know why they are being included. This goes for the meeting too. Everyone should know when they arrive why they are there. When an agenda is prepared, it provides a clear sense of purpose and provides a map as to how the time will be utilized. With an agenda, it's easier to get the meeting started, keep members on track, and move the conversation back on track should it wander off course. My preference is to have meeting agendas distributed at least 3 days in advance of the meeting. This way, individuals can all be prepared. I think it's unfair to distribute an agenda right before the meeting unless you've made prior arrangements with those who will be key participants or leaders throughout the meeting. Now, an agenda doesn't have to be super formal. They can range from simplistic, such as big bullets to hit on major ideas for a discussion, to detailed, which would include items, descriptions, and anticipated time durations. I typically prepare mine on letterhead as they are official documents. However, it is acceptable to have them posted on whiteboards, screens, or other mediums where individuals can understand the purpose and why they are included. If you don't have an agenda, then why are you having the meeting to begin with? And if you're going to say because it's brainstorming or for ideas, then that would be the purpose and that would be your agenda. In addition, those responsible for different portions of the agenda need to be prepared, which again is why I like to send mine in advance. So for example, let's say we're going to host a donor engagement meeting. And you're probably familiar with Google Calendar, so you can send calendar invites directly to participants. So I have a list of individuals I want to include for this donor engagement meeting. Now, assuming that I didn't have to get the agenda prepared when I'm sending the calendar invite, I want to be sure I have a clear statement of purpose. Take a moment to read this. So, when individuals receive this calendar invite, will they know why they are being included at this meeting? Yes. It says what we're going to be focusing on, how long it lasts, and what we're going to be doing. So the purpose articulates that this would be for brainstorming. Now, if I was able to get my agenda drafted prior to sending the invite, I may also wish to include a short version of this agenda. For example, the purpose is clearly identified, brainstorm how to increase engagement, but I've broken it down into the various portions of the meeting, and I've even listed how long these are going to last. That way, when people receive their invite, they'll know, okay, it says we're going to brainstorm individually for 20 minutes, so that will be the expectation for me. Of course, I'd want to make sure that Aaron and Rebecca know their roles prior to distributing this invite because I don't want them to be caught off guard. Here's an example of a meeting from this past December. The provost and I co-chair the top tier executive committee, and this is the agenda I sent out in December. You'll notice, first it's on letterhead. It has the group name across the top, the date, time, and the location. It identifies the membership, and it has the agenda in terms of what we're going to be doing during our time. Well, I know it may be a little hard to read. Under agenda, you're going to notice there is a descriptor, updates by area, which clearly identifies the process. It reads, each lead will have 5 minutes to share updates regarding progress toward developing Top Tier 2.0. Each update will be followed by further conversation and feedback. So there it's clearly articulated a time constraint as well as what the expectation is during that time. People who find their name listed know they'll have 5 minutes to provide an overview and that there will be some dialogue following their talking time. Given this is a 1-hour meeting, it was imperative that I kept this group moving forward. So rather than just distributing this agenda with the expectation, I went ahead and took a few extra steps to make sure we were all aligned and on the same page. Take a moment to read this. You can see I made clear this was a high-level overview. These leads had 5 minutes to share, and then feedback would come from the group at large. In addition, I encouraged a slide because I have found that if they work from a slide, individuals are more concise and focused than just speaking at will. Expectations have been made clear, the purpose is stated, and this should guide our process. After I had sent this to the leads and given them a day to reply back in case they had questions, I then distributed the agenda. That way, nobody is caught off guard and there were no surprises. Our second guideline is to start on time and end on time. Why do we do this? It is out of respect. Do you know how many times I've sat waiting for others? And I'm sure you've had the same experience too. Yes, we all have things that happen that make us late, but that is life, and we shouldn't punish the group for the sake of an individual. Now, of course, if the individual happens to be leading the member or is essential to the group, you may have to wait. But generally speaking, we want to be respectful of everyone's time. As an attendee, this is important. If you are late, please, I ask you, do not announce your apology when you enter the room or the group. While oftentimes I know we can think that this is being polite, when we arrive late, we're already creating a disruption. We're already dragging people's attention away from the task at hand. And if we stop to say, oh, geez, I'm so sorry because of traffic or there wasn't parking or whatever the case may be, it pulls everyone's attention away from the task at hand. We don't want to do that. Walk in as quietly as possible or enter quietly, I guess we can do on Zoom or WebEx. Don't make a big scene. Don't make it a public apology. And please don't ask the person next to you, what did I miss? Or can you catch me up? That's going to be your responsibility once the meeting is well underway or once it has concluded. If you are leading regularly occurring meetings, people will be very quick to notice that you start on time. So make that your habit and your practice, and people will tend to show up on time. In addition, it's just important to end on time. By having a definitive end time, you will make sure that you can accomplish what is on your agenda and get people back to their work promptly. You can also ensure that those who have other meetings can leave and be on time. This is a general rule for me. Given the variety of complex situations individuals I work with deal with, I know I have to be conscious of their time. So an example of this, years ago when I was a fifth grade teacher back in Missouri, our grade level meetings were known to go for hours on end after school. Sometimes we even made dinner orders because they lasted so long. When I became grade level chair, I decided to move these meetings before school. We had about a 35-minute time period in which to conduct our business. Of course, you can imagine the shock of my fellow teachers, as well as their consternation, but I emphasized the value of their time and proceeding in a clearly defined fashion, which is exactly what we're supposed to do. I also had to lay the ground rules, such as we did not need the entire group to look at certificates to determine which style was best. That is something a subcommittee could work on. We did not need the entire group to give their feedback in terms of should we have pasta or pizza at an award ceremony. Again, subcommittee. So it was really changing that structure and helping them understand that they each would have a voice, but it needed to be done in a more orchestrated fashion. With this assurance, the early morning meeting turned out to work very well and was cited as very beneficial. Third, end with an action plan. With this guideline, we know when we plan an agenda, we need to think, what do we expect from each person at the table? That allows us, when we end, to develop our next steps and be sure that each person is a contributing member. As you know, there's nothing more confusing than that person who seems to be at every meeting, yet doesn't have a defined role or responsibility. Why are they there? If they're in the room at the table or online, they should have a role. As you are wrapping up, it is important to decide who is responsible for what the timeline will be, and the overall next step, such as do they submit materials, a follow-up report, another meeting, etc. Everyone needs to understand that they are responsible and in control for what happens next. You should be able to ask your group, what will you do by when? If you don't have an action plan, then was your meeting time really used wisely? So at this point, I'm going to pause for questions. I'll stop sharing for just a moment. So if you have a question, I would like you to just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask, or you could go ahead and place it in the chat. All right, Marie says she's going to be sure she sends her agendas 3 days in advance. Thank you. Your participants will appreciate it. All right, well, if you do have questions, please be sure to jot them down because we will have another opportunity for questions later on in the session. But I'm going to go ahead and continue on. One item I want you to be aware of is what is called the parking lot. And the parking lot is a place to record important topics that are not the focus of the meeting. As you know, from any time you're conversing with people about a certain subject matter, it seems it can get off track very quickly. For example, I asked my sister the other day, have you talked to mom this week? And she said, I was going to call her, but then I went to Target. I found these crafts for children. Have you seen them before? They have these little kits. She continued to go on, and it was clear we were off topic. And that's the same thing that will happen in meetings. What we want to do is be sure that we have a place to record information that is maybe somewhat relevant, but not focused on the task at hand. For example, when discussing increasing student retention strategies, the issue of vacant positions was cited as a problem. While it clearly tied to the matter at hand, the purpose wasn't about vacant positions. Our purpose for discussion was strategies. So this is a time when we would note in the parking lot, vacant position, and then we could return to that at another time. Okay, so it's a way to simply record those ideas that may be important, but not really focused on our task at hand. However, the one thing we have to make sure is that we have a way to manage these as a follow-up. Some things to think about. Encourage question writing. As you know, oftentimes people will anticipate what it is you're going to be talking about, and they'll do so by asking questions rather than letting you explain. They want to jump right in. So the best thing to do is encourage question writing as you're speaking, and then have time devoted to answering those questions. I've also included a link here on handwritten notes. This research piece shows that they're more effective. You can take a look at that for your own interest. When we encourage people to write down questions, it helps avoid that constant interruption, which is also annoying, but prevents people from asking those questions that you may be answering already. Also, you need to be thinking about how you can create that inclusive environment. Determine how you can break people up into groups to accomplish small tasks or make decisions. Know how to switch up your groups and provide opportunities for feedback and input from the group members. Again, be sure each person has responsibilities. Finally, be conscious of your timing. Okay, research shows we have about 10 minutes before people's brains start to fill up. So be aware and be sure to set your purpose clearly at the beginning. Some things to think about as you prepare for a meeting. You want to be sure you're in the best environment. If you know the conference room is always freezing cold in the early morning, it is probably not a great idea to have a 7 a.m. meeting there. You want your guests to be comfortable. You also want to have the best time. If your staff usually works 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., a 4 o'clock p.m. meeting on a Friday probably is not an optimal time. By creating the optimal environment, you are preparing people to active listen. Active listening allows people to live in the present moment, take in the words, expressions, body language, and cues, rather than simply waiting for their turn to talk. Okay? Now, this is a lot more difficult in a digital environment, but it's something we certainly want to be aware of. Too often, presentations can drone on and on. If it's a small group meeting, determine how materials can be shared in advance, with the expectation that participants will be prepared to discuss. Make sure your operations are all working. Who is going to lead what part? How are meeting notes going to be recorded? Are these distributed? Are they posted? How will parking lot topics be handled and managed? So here is a meeting checklist that you might find useful. Go ahead and take a minute to read through it. All right, so that is just a sample of one checklist that you may find useful, and it should relate well to what we have talked about thus far. Right now, what I'm going to ask you to do is I would like you to please record by writing down or on your screen 3 takeaways you have thus far. All right, so it looks like meeting, excuse me, meeting time should be appropriate, respect people's time, don't be delayed. Send the meeting agenda 3 days in advance, start and end on time, plan and over communicate, start and end on time, be organized, right participants are invited to the meeting, the parking lot, delegate, give everyone a purpose and a role, making an agenda and sending it out, stating the purpose of why they're there, importance of the agenda with advance notice, parking lot, and how to optimize attention spans and convenience for attendees. Having an agenda starting and ending on time and having an action plan. Very good. All right. So With meetings, of course, there isn't necessarily a definitive right or wrong way to do things. These are all guidelines and tips to help you be productive and be sure you are utilizing time wisely. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Now, I'll tell you, the digital environment is hard for me. I was an elementary teacher, as I stated before. My classroom was very actively involved with one another. I believe strongly in cooperative learning, in discussion, and learning from one another. So when we get to this practice portion, it's a little bit difficult because I know you're going to have to do this independently rather than in small groups, which would be my preference. So this is not a test. This is not an exam. This is just to, again, take what we've learned and see how we can apply it. Go ahead and read this scenario. Okay, so the graduate college received $50,000 for undergrads who want to go to grad school, and you're going to have to figure out how this is distributed. That's no small task by any means. It looks like there's already a group put together, the advisory council, which is you plus 3 others. So there are 4 on this advisory council, and you're going to figure out how to distribute these funds. The dean has shared a document on how they've done this before, so it looks like you have something to work from, but she has requested that you determine another method. So not only are you going to look at what has been done before, but what you can do to continue forward or propose a different suggestion. Therefore, you need to create an agenda for a 60-minute meeting. Okay? Now, as I said, this isn't a test, but I want you to think through what we've talked about thus far, and I'd like you to go ahead and create a draft agenda. I'm going to give you about 8 minutes here to get this drafted down in terms of what you would need to do. Any questions? I can't see the screen. Okay. All right. So go ahead and work on drafting this, and then we will take a look at it together as a group. You can begin. Let's wrap this up in the next minute, please. Okay, let's take a look at this. So this meeting is to review a document, almost like a policy, and brainstorm an alternative plan. Luckily, the group is already predetermined and the charge is set by the dean. So go ahead and take a look at what you've drafted thus far. As I said, there isn't a black and white answer for this scenario, and there will always be variance. So I will lead you through questions so you can assess your agenda. My thoughts would be on the following based about what we've talked about. Is your agenda going to be on letterhead, or do you plan to use letterhead or an official logo? Does it indicate the group name? Does it have the date, time, and location so people know when they're planning when and where they are supposed to be? Does it identify the membership so people know who is included in the group and help them understand how this group functions? Or was a calendar invite sent so that everyone knows the purpose and who is included? Does your agenda identify what will happen next? Do you list the big ideas? Did you include times and people responsible? Did you think about next steps? So with that, I would again like to turn it over to you for questions or comments you had after going through this exercise. You can either ask them by unmuting yourself or type them into the chat. No questions. Everybody's like, yep, perfectly clear. Oh, good. Here we go. My question is, what about in meetings when only some people have a specific role while others are listeners? So yes, a great example of that was one of the agendas I just showed you, the top tier executive committee, because the leads were all going to be the ones presenting, but there were more people identified on the membership. So those individuals would be part of the feedback group. As you remember, the leads were going to present on their information, and then there was an opportunity for feedback. So my question, I guess, would go back to you. Do you structure opportunities for those individuals to provide their thought and feedback as the meeting progresses? Okay. Next one, as a leader of a meeting, how can I navigate disagreements or the lack of consensus when trying to make a decision? It's a great question as well. So, trying to reach consensus. First of all, we need to be sure that we open it up so that everyone has the opportunity to express their viewpoints. Secondly, we need an orderly process. So, for example, we may say the discussion is going to occur. And if it's something where the discussion is not reaching consensus, what I would do is I would pull in a strategy where I'd say, all right, we have 9 people in the room. I'm going to go around the table. Each person has 1 minute to give their opinion or thoughts on the matter. When we're finished, we will take a roll call vote. Okay. Everyone now gets the opportunity to speak their opinion on the matter. And once it is over, everybody will be required to vote, and there will be your decision making. So that would be one way that I would go about doing that. Do we have other questions? All right, one more here. I'm a student and teach a course in the College of Education. Do any particular agenda styles or meeting types work best with individuals geared towards the education profession? So again, I would say it goes back to the purpose of the meeting. So if you are wanting to bring people together to really create a cohesive environment, then you'd want to have a team building type of meeting where you structure activities to get them involved together and working together. If it's something where you want to put people together and learn about different areas of interest, you're going to want more of the status update type of meeting where individuals may come in and present on their meeting topic. If they're doing that, what I would strongly encourage is that they create some sort of material that can be distributed ahead of time so that people at the meeting can learn about what these various topics are and then hear a brief presentation of high-level materials and then have the opportunity to engage in some type of dialogue rather than just sitting through presentation after presentation after presentation. Okay. Again, think, what is the purpose of pulling this group together and what is it that they're going to do? So I guess my overall answer would be it just depends on the meeting. Further questions? All right, I'm not seeing any. So with that, you should now be familiar with the different types of meetings and their functions. Again, we want to be sure we keep in mind what is the purpose of our meeting. You should be familiar with meeting objectives and guidelines. And you should be familiar with how to plan and prepare for a meeting. So again, if you would, for each of those bullet points, I would like you to write down one thing that you can take away with you. One key takeaway for each bullet point. Thank you. I see comments coming into the chat. Agenda setting, the type of meeting should guide the agenda and plans for the meeting. Being prepared and purposeful to utilize everyone's time effectively. 1, agenda, schedule, and environment. 2, clear with the agenda. 3, task and timelines. allowing participants to prepare by informing them in advance of the purpose of the meeting, meeting types and functions. By choosing carefully, you can make the meeting more productive. There are many types of meetings and appropriate strategies for each type. It is important to share the meeting objectives and guidelines and communicate those. Planning and preparing for meetings is very important, and it is helpful to create an agenda for the meeting. Respect for time and appropriateness of time, purpose of the meeting and exact time and agenda, having an objective and an agenda, and during the meeting conveying all the topics in form and time. Figuring out the type of meeting, it will allow you to plan and prepare for the meeting as well as set the tone. Having an organized, prepared agenda is important. Great. So some great feedback there. So with that, I did include a reference list. If you're interested in getting more information about any of this information, you can take a look here. And as well as my contact information, I'm always happy to follow up should you have questions. So at this time, we are nearing the end of our time, but I would like to open it up. If there are any final questions or comments, I am more than happy to try to address those with you now. And yes, we will be happy to share these slides with you so that you have them for a reference source. All right, well, thank you. I'm seeing some feedback that you appreciate the time today, so I am glad. Wow, thank you. I am very happy I could be here to be a part of this. As I said, this is one of the great opportunities I have in my current position, is to get to be able to go out and speak to different groups such as yourself. So as a graduate of UNLV, I can say it is truly my pleasure to be here today, to have been with you during this time. And again, I'm glad you found this useful, and I hope I have more opportunities to engage with you in the future. With that, I will turn it back over to the Graduate College. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Kahlberg, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. And thank you to all our participants for joining us. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day, and thank you.
My pleasure.